I knew something was off the second she walked in. Not by what she said, but by the way the room reacted to her presence. The way conversations cut off mid-sentence and people suddenly went still, like they were bracing for impact. That kind of silence doesn't come from respect, it comes from anticipation, from knowing someone just brought a storm in with them. My name is Natalie Moore. I'm 35, the head supervisor at Cargo Freight in Plainfield, Indiana. Before this job, I spent 8 years in the Army doing logistics, movement coordination, damage control, the kind of work that trains you to keep your voice steady when everything around you is falling apart. And this place needed that kind of steadiness. Cargo freight is old school to its core. Steel desks bolted to the floor, handwritten logs stacked in trays, dispatch radios that still crackle like they're broadcasting from the 90s. But for all that, it runs tight. Every route is tracked, every mile is accounted for. One wrong call, one sloppy adjustment, and the entire operation backs up like a clogged artery. That's why they put me here. So when Ava Sinclair walked into our operations meeting that Tuesday morning, it wasn't the designer heels or the bright red lipstick that set off alarms in my head. It was the polish without the weight behind it. She carried a laminated presentation folder like a shield and had the posture of someone used to talking, not listening. "Hi everyone, I'm Ava," she said brightly, like this was a team building retreat and not a live dispatch floor. "I'm thrilled to be stepping in as your new operations manager." No one clapped. She launched straight into her slideshow, tossing out phrases like load efficiency, automated dispatch integration, AI-driven fuel metrics. On paper, it sounded slick. In reality, it was hollow. There was nothing about driver fatigue, nothing about weather volatility, nothing about the real-world slack you need baked into routes to keep everything from collapsing. Anyone who had ever managed live freight could hear the gaps immediately. Most of the room stayed neutral. I stayed quiet, arms folded, watching her talk past us instead of to us. She wasn't reading the room at all. She thought she was teaching a class. That afternoon, her email hit my inbox. Subject line, Routing Model Optimization Draft. The attachment name made my jaw tighten before I even opened it. When I did, my hands stopped moving. It was my model, the one I'd been building after hours for 2 months. The logic was mine, the structure was mine, the backup node logic, the cost assumptions down to the decimals, even the grouping patterns. She'd cleaned it up, dressed it better, slapped her name on it, but the skeleton was unmistakable. I hadn't sent that file to anyone. It lived in a locked folder on my local machine. I never uploaded it, never shared it. Only one other person had clearance to access that level of file tracking. Jacob from IT. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to his office. Jacob's the quiet type, mid-30s, cargo shorts even in winter, earbuds always in. He spun around when I knocked. I asked him for a minute. He pulled an earbud out and nodded. I told him someone accessed my local folder. Not a hack, not malware, my credentials. Matt made him sit up. He pulled the admin logs and we combed through activity. My normal logins were there. Then he stopped. Sunday night, 11:46 p.m. Device ID didn't match my workstation. The IP traced back upstairs, executive wing, hardwired. I'd never logged in from there. I asked him to pull the cameras. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A figure entering the conference room with a key card and a shoulder bag. Navy leather, gold monogram, Ivy League patch stitched on the front. Ava's bag. Jacob looked at me and asked if I wanted to flag it. I told him not yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. The next morning, I kept my head down. Ava breezed in like nothing had happened, laughing with finance, coffee in hand. At the team meeting, she handed out printed packets. The cover read, Joint Optimization Initiative prepared by Ava Sinclair. She talked about collaboration, about efficiencies her team had identified, about improvements her model could deliver. She never once mentioned me. Not a thank you, not an acknowledgement. I stayed quiet, let her keep digging. Back at my desk, I opened the file again. It was still mine underneath the polish. This wasn't ambition. It was theft, dressed up to look impressive. That evening, I went back to Jacob. She'd accessed more files, private notes, internal assessments. He asked if I wanted to report it. I told him no, I wanted bait. We built a parallel drive that mimicked my folder exactly, a version of the plan that looked solid on paper but was riddled with pressure cracks, fuel margins too tight, timing windows that couldn't survive real conditions. Nothing obvious, just enough to fail when it mattered. Jacob cloaked it so it would only unlock from that same executive machine. If she touched it, we'd know. She did. The logs lit up. Full download. Everything. I didn't react, I just breathed. 2 days later, she walked into the next ops meeting like she was headlining a keynote. Perfect hair, glossy packets, confidence turned up too high. She talked about the future of route planning, about streamlined corridors and reduced refueling, about cutting idle hours across the Midwest. I could see the fake numbers printed right there. She clicked through her slides, smiling, unaware she was holding something primed to explode. Colored bars, route graphs, numbers lined up in a nice clean row, all of it fake. People flipped through the packets, nodding like she'd unlocked the secrets of the universe, until Doug, one of our senior drivers, the kind who's been through 5 dispatch managers and 2 divorces, squinted at the chart and raised a hand. "Wait," he said, "that Mu Indy to Bismarck stretch, that's an 18-hour pull. What's your fuel margin look like if winter hits early? We've had snow slowdowns in North Dakota since mid-October last year." Ava blinked, smiled. "Great question. We factored in seasonal changes when building the model. Fuel efficiency stays within safe margins." I bit the inside of my cheek. That buffer might work in July in theory, but it wouldn't cover backup fuel hauls, reroutes, or even a 30-minute jackknife delay. I kept my tone light. "Maybe we can compare notes later, Ava. Make sure the numbers match real case scenarios." She smiled at me like I'd just offered to help with her wedding registry. "Absolutely, Natalie. Would love your input." She still thought I was in her corner. After the meeting, I went back to my desk. 10 minutes later, Jacob messaged me. She pulled the fuel logistics file again, 3 more times, still the dummy version. That made 5 total pulls from the Decoy folder. No attempt to cross-reference, no sign she'd noticed anything off. She was building her whole pitch on top of dry rot. Later that afternoon, I caught her walking out of the copy room, arms full of color-printed slides and sticky notes. "You gearing up for something?" I asked. "Big exec pitch next week?" she said. "I want the data polished by Friday." I just nodded. "Let me know if you want to run simulations." She grinned. "I'm good. I've got everything I need." "Yeah, you do. And every piece of it a setup." I spent the next morning building the real version of the model, the working one, clean, tested, reinforced with actual conditions from last winter's routes. I locked it down on a flash drive and left no trace on the company network. Only 2 people knew it existed, me and Jacob. Meanwhile, Ava was moving like she'd already won. Around noon, she pulled the logistics and finance leads into the small conference room, closed door. I watched through the glass while she pointed at her slides and spoke with her hands, all confident and corporate polished. I walked by just close enough to hear. "This will streamline Q1 and get us ahead of the curve." They nodded. A few took notes. She was pushing early adoption, which meant she wasn't just bluffing for a presentation. She wanted this locked in before anyone had a chance to question it. That afternoon, I sat with Jacob in the server room. It's quiet back there, humming routers, cold air, 0. "You still tracking her polls?" I asked. He swiveled his chair toward the screen. "Yep. Last access was yesterday at 11:38 p.m. Same dummy folder, no cross-reference, no audit log pings. She's all in on the fake version." I nodded. "Keep watching." He smirked. "It's going to be a hell of a show." Right before I left for the day, Ava caught me by the elevators. Her heels clicked down the hallway like she was walking a runway. She stopped right in front of me, all smiles. "Hey," she said, like we were 2 teammates sharing a win. "Thanks for your support this week." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Happy to compare data anytime." She tilted her head a little, smiled wider, didn't catch a thing. "Of course," she said. "I'll loop you in after the board signs off." I hit the elevator button and didn't say another word. That night, Jacob sent me another ping just after 10. She's back in again, pulling charts, projections, export logs, all from the dummy. I didn't even reply. just powered down my laptop and sat back. Let her keep building. Let her keep polishing. Everything she needed to win that room tomorrow was rooted in a spreadsheet wired to fail. By the time she hit slide 5, they'd start smelling the rot. By slide 10, it'd be obvious. But I wasn't rushing it. No big move, no test pounding, just slow, steady steps, data-backed, logged, unshakable. The next morning, I walked into the executive review with my flash drive in my pocket and nothing on my face. No smugness, no nerves, just locked in. The boardroom was packed. Senior leadership, logistics heads, finance, even the COO was in his seat, scrolling his phone. I sat near the end of the table, not at the front, not in the spotlight. Not yet. Ava stood at the screen, dressed like she'd already been promoted. Sleek blazer, hair pulled back tight, polished like a press conference. "Thanks for being here," she started. "Today, I'm proud to walk you through the new optimization model I've developed for cargo's regional freight routes." Click. Slide 1 came up. Projected turnaround improvements. Q1, Q3. She kept talking, confident, sharp. "This plan reduces turnaround time by 15% across our 5 busiest lanes. Fuel stops reduced by 22%, idle time down by 11. The room was locked on her. Charts clean, numbers bold. For the first 5 minutes, it looked airtight. Then came the first crack. Don from Fleet, an old-school guy who didn't give a damn about slides, leaned forward and asked, "What's your refuel margin if winter hits early in the Dakotas?" Ava didn't flinch at first. "We've modeled with a 5% buffer which holds under standard conditions." Don frowned. "Standard conditions don't cover black ice on Route 83 in mid-October. That corridor doesn't give you refuel options for 80 miles. 5% won't hold if weather hits." Ava hesitated. "We anticipate adjustments if delays arise." Don cut her off. "You don't adjust in a blizzard. You plan before it hits." That landed hard. People started flipping back through the packet. Then someone from finance, Carla, raised another issue. "Your mileage projection for the Indiana to Wisconsin run shows a 10% gain, but we've got 2 construction bottlenecks confirmed through March. Where's the margin for that?" Ava's eyes flicked down. "We accounted for standard delays. That stretch averages—" "No, we've seen 30-minute dead stops 3 times this month," Carla said. "This model doesn't reflect that." It was unraveling one thread at a time. I stayed quiet, didn't move, just waited. Then the director of ops, Paul, looked over at me. "Natalie, could we compare this to your baseline model? I remember you worked on a version last quarter." I met his eyes, nodded once. "Sure, got it right here." I stood, walked calmly to the head of the table, and plugged in my flash drive. No build-up, no speech, just pulled up the original. "Same structure," I said, "but this one's built with last winter's fuel logs, active route delays, and real-time driver reports. Fuel margins are up 7% for safety, layovers adjusted for topographic delays, and regional weather history. Mileage gains are smaller, but they're real." I didn't look at Ava. I didn't need to. The screen said everything. I clicked through the real model, steady and quiet. The room had shifted. No more polite nodding. Now people were leaning forward, pens still waiting. "This version runs off actual fueling logs from last winter," I said. "All margins are based on worst-case weather conditions, not best-case averages. Fuel stops built in across high-risk routes, especially northern corridors like Bismarck and Fargo." Slide by slide, I laid it out. Nothing flashy, just fact after fact. Contingency plans, regional backups, load balance shifts during peak hours. Contingency window for Route 83 adds 23 minutes total, but saves 3 hours of stranded downtime if weather hits. That's what the buffer's for. I pulled up the mileage projections next. Ava's plan had bold numbers. Mine had raw data, timestamps, delivery delays, satellite pings, stuff you only had if you actually ran the floor and read driver logs. She was quiet, not typing, not correcting me, just frozen in her chair. I brought up her version next, put it side by side with mine on the split screen. Her model, I said plainly, cuts time and cost aggressively. Looks good on paper, but the source data comes from this file path. I highlighted the directory string. It pointed to my Decoy. Jacob stood up in the back of the room, holding a printed audit log. We traced 5 logins from the executive floor, he said, all using Natalie's credentials, accessing files from a mirrored drive we created for security tracking. Device ID matched a single machine upstairs. He walked up and handed the printout to the COO. Last access was 11:48 p.m., night before Ava's internal pitch. A few execs shifted in their chairs. The COO looked at Ava. "Did you develop this model alone?" Her mouth opened, closed, silence. Everyone saw it. Her face didn't twist. She didn't cry, just dropped her gaze to the table and sat there, still small. Then her father, the owner of Cargo, Mr. Sinclair, finally spoke. He'd stayed quiet through the whole thing, arms crossed, watching, listening. He looked at her, then back at the screen, and said flatly, "We'll revisit your role in this project after this meeting." That was it. No yelling, no speech, just a sentence that ended her run right there in front of everyone. I stepped back from the screen and returned to my seat. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, but I didn't look down either. No one said it out loud. They didn't have to. They all knew what just happened. I built that system, and she tried to hijack it. About 2 hours after the meeting ended, I got a tap on the shoulder from HR. Upstairs conference room, closed session. Now, when I walked in, the tension was already thick. COO, head of HR, Mr. Sinclair, Ava was seated at the far end of the table, staring at the folder in front of her like it might catch fire. The COO didn't waste time. "Ava, based on today's findings, we're removing you from logistics operations effective immediately." She blinked. No protest, no spin, just nodded like she'd known it was coming. "You'll begin an internal development rotation. That means training, compliance, policy, project structure. We'll reevaluate your placement after that cycle's complete." Then they turned to me. "Effective today," he said, "we'd like you to assume lead coordinator duties on the regional contract rollout. You'll work directly with fleet and finance to deploy your original model." I gave one small nod. That was enough. They dismissed the room. I walked out first, but I felt her footsteps catch up behind me. We were halfway down the hallway before she spoke. "I want to understand how you work." I stopped, turned. She didn't sound smug now, didn't sound like anything really, just flat, worn down. I looked her in the eye. "Start with not breaking into people's files." She nodded, just once. No excuse, no argument. And for the first time since she walked through the door that first day, she didn't feel larger than life, just small. She kept walking, heels softer than usual on the hallway tile. I headed straight to the server room. Jacob was already there, like he'd been waiting. "She toast?" he asked. "Out of ops, starting internal training next week." He raised his eyebrows. "That's something. We storing everything?" He tapped a USB drive and held it up. "Backed up 3 ways. If she even breathes wrong, we've got it." "Good." We didn't high-five, didn't say anything else. We just nodded, both of us knowing this wasn't over until it was buried in signatures and audit trails. I went back to my desk, sat down, pulled up the real model. Clean, precise, mine. No balloons, no announcement, just the same desk, the same cold coffee, and a plan that would actually work. Didn't feel like a win, didn't need to, just felt right. Next morning, I stepped out of my truck just after 6. The yard was already alive. Forklifts backing out, trucks lining up at the gate, drivers bullshitting by the vending machines like it was any other Thursday. No one knew a damn thing about what happened upstairs, and honestly, they didn't need to. I walked into dispatch, dropped my bag, logged in, sent a quick message to Jacob. "Appreciate you." He replied with a single thumbs up emoji. No words, none needed. A few minutes later, the internal newsletter dropped into everyone's inbox. I opened it. 3rd bullet down, bottom of the page. Natalie Moore, appointed project lead for Q1 regional logistics expansion. No banner, no photo, just a line. I was fine with that. Around 10, I stepped into the hallway to grab a coffee and saw her, Ava. She was heading the opposite direction, holding a tablet, hair tied back in a plain knot. No eye contact, no smile, but just before she passed, she gave me a small nod. That was enough. I walked into dispatch, the team was halfway through route assignments, half paying attention. I raised my voice just enough to cut through the noise. Quick thing, going forward, we're sticking with what works. No gimmicks, no guesswork, just tested systems and clean data. A few heads turned. No one said much, just slow nods, the kind you give when something finally makes sense again. I sat back down, opened the real model, started reviewing the next rollout. Nothing flashy, just the work. And I kept thinking, not about her or the fallout or what could have happened. I thought about people like me, folks who've been passed over, talked down to, had their work stripped, rewritten, and paraded around like someone else built it. If that's you, hear me on this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't slamming doors or making speeches. It's doing your job so well that the truth becomes impossible to ignore. If you liked it, please like, comment, and show your appreciation. You will help the channel.